All right, so welcome to 224 Turbocharged Sales with B2B Special Sales System. So thank you everybody for coming today. And Lynn, I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you. I'm also going to be sharing some templates that'll be following up after the lesson to help support the teaching I'm doing. Today, relative to lesson 1, we're going to be going over defining or redefining your ideal customer profile, which to me is the basis of how all prospecting starts. And then I'm going to share with you also going into these special databases, particularly if you know your SIC code. I have or your NASA's code. I have an example I'm going to go through today. And then if anybody wants to share their SIC code or their NASA's code for their ideal customer, then we can also, if we have time, go into that. Now, relative to who your ideal customer profile would be, it would be someone you're going to think about. Who's your favorite client that you've worked with? They've been easy to work with. Your message resonates with them. They're good on getting back to you. They're good on follow-up. They're good on a collaborative process that even though you're making suggestions at the time, they may not embrace them, but as you work with them, they continue to come around to see the benefits of your product or your service. So let me do a share screening here. And let me find my PowerPoint here. It should be. Oh, hold on here 1 minute. Oh, let me get it back. Let me get back to 1. So it should be up here now. I just had it a minute ago. There we go. All right. All right. So again, so here we are with session 1. We're going to go over today. The lessons will be second quarter. So my goal for everybody is that you're going to increase your sales by 1%, assuming that you're implementing the system that we're going to go through. And depending upon your time schedule, I'm going to ask you down the road to think about, okay, am I going to work on the system an hour every day? Do I have a luxury of 2 hours? And you're actually going to have to put it into your calendar to really make it happen. Otherwise, what's going to happen is I'm going to share the system with you and your life is going to pull you along. And as I mentioned to you also, I'm gifting 2 20-minute laser coaching sessions that I really want you to schedule with me 30 days after the course ends. So number 1, I can be a accountability partner for you to check in terms of how is the system working with you, how many calls are you making, how many appointments are you making, and a follow-up. And then if you have any questions or things that are frustrating you, that we can kind of work through together. So we're going to go over the mindset you have to have first. Then I'm going to take you through the ideal client prospect. I also had emailed you the template to, if it helps you today during the session. Also, I'll go into more detail, and then we'll finish with the these unlimited pre-qualified prospect lists that are through these databases. If you aren't using them, I want to share that information with you and show you how to use them. So I always like to start each of my teaching sessions with a quote. This one's from John D. Rockefeller. So the quote is, "The secret to success is doing the common things uncommonly well." So my message today is I'm going to create a system with you for the next 3 weeks. And if you apply that system, it'll work. It's not complicated. It's simple, but it's really being dedicated and carving the time out. And if you do the system, you will increase your sales. So let's talk about lesson 1, which is the key to succeeding. So you have to have a mindset, optimism, and hope. I am genetically blessed with optimism. Some people have it, some people don't. There's a book I'll also going to be sharing a book list with you later this week. And in that book is The Power of Optimism by Alan Moy. And he goes into the scientific research showing about how they've done studies that people genetically have optimism or they don't. But the good news with that book is if you aren't genetically an optimistic person, it'll show you techniques and traits and characteristics that you can work on in terms of becoming more internally optimistic. And then we always have to have hope. We have to have hope about life. We have to have hope about helping others, help about improving our life. And with that, that guides us through the difficult times. Resilience. You have to have an attitude of basically not giving up. That even though yesterday may not have been as good as today, you're going to as Scarlett O'Hara said in Gone with the Wind, tomorrow is a new day. So take that approach and go forward. And you have to also be realistic. Is this a market I can realistically get into? Do I have the appropriate background to really be able to work in this industry, be it with the product or the service? If I don't, where do I need to go to become more knowledgeable so I can serve that market better? And then tenacity. Tenacity is something, I guess, there again, I'm blessed with. And I know my clients over the years have said, boy, Eleanor, when you're on a project, you're like a dog with a bone. You just do not give up. And that's what you're going to use this tenacity when I show you the databases, because sometimes they're going to be a little bit frustrating and you're going to end up with 14,000 prospects and you're going to say, well, this doesn't help me, Eleanor. 14,000 is too big. So you're going to have to be patient with yourself trying to drill down and work on narrowing these database on prospects. It's just like if you're familiar with Sales Navigator in LinkedIn, it's the same thing. In order for your searches to be effective at LinkedIn, you really have to narrow it down, because you have to make it a manageable list that you can really work with. Smaller is better in this case, particularly when you're coming out of the gate and trying to, for the first time, or getting back to basics of working with a system. So my goal to you is that we're going to be talking about 25 to 50 prospects. We're not going to talk about 500 or 1,000 because it's going to overwhelm you. And so this is something I came across. It turns out that it was hold on here. It was in 2017. This came out with the book, The Ultimate Sales Machine. And I actually did get the book gently used at some point. And I see a lot of coaches actually using this triangle now. They're not even giving him credit. So he died, I want to say, in about 2012. And so out of respect for Chet Holmes, who came up with this industry standard that defines the demand generation. So most people don't realize that at the time that when you're making those phone calls or those reach outs, or you're going to the chamber meetings or whatever you're doing, is that most people aren't ready to buy. It's a numbers game. So if you look up here at the 3%, statistically speaking, these are the people that are actually ready to purchase. They have a familiarity. They know what their problem is. They've looked into it. They know they need to solve it, and they're ready to move, and they currently have the budget. So any action that you go out and do in the marketplace, you have to realize that out of the gate, you have a probability of connecting with someone at a 3% rate of your overall efforts. So when you come down here, the next category is the open to buy, but they're not looking. So down here in 7, it could be, well, they're familiar with the problem, okay, but they don't know necessarily maybe what the solution is, so they're not looking. Or they may have a freeze in their budgeting. You come down here to the 30%, and basically they're not thinking about it because they have a problem, but they haven't defined the problem. And that's where you can come in and help them gently uncover the fact of how your solution in your product or service is going to solve that problem. And then 30% of them, basically, they aren't interested at all. They're not focusing on that problem. They've got other issues in the organization, or the company could be up for sale. They've got some family issues if it's a family company. There's just a lot of things going on. And then down here is your 30%. They're never going to buy. But as you know, it's a numbers game. So you have to keep calling, you have to keep sending emails, you have to keep going to network meetings, and you try all these different avenues. And we'll talk about LinkedIn later, because social media also is an area, but it's not a be all end all. You really have to have a whole system that integrates and use all of these foundational pieces, and you keep building it. So we're going to start with the ideal customer profile is your first rung of the ladder. The second rung of the ladder is having the databases. Next week, we're going to get into how do you really have a good voicemail script that's going to be succinct, short. It's going to describe the outcome and the transformation you provide. And the same thing with your email. And then we'll get in on the third week into the other areas, which I call our dessert, which is basically a referral script. How do you network? And then how do you use LinkedIn a little bit? I'm not going to go deep into LinkedIn because there are a lot of experts that do it better. But I took this demand generation and I have modified it for today's world. So these numbers, as I said, are from 2017. In today's world, these have changed, in my opinion. So what we have here now is 3% of them, yes, again, are still in the active mode. 7% are getting their budget approved, but they're not active, but they're open to buying. Okay, so that's again as a timing. One of the things I learned about is I have another business called Corporate Success Partners, where I do leadership training with DISC. And when I first transitioned from my search business into the leadership business, I thought, okay, fine, I'm just going to go out. I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing with the executive search, which I've been doing for 20 years, connecting with people and, via phone and email. And what I found was that basically for that industry, they have their budget set in January, but they set their budget up in the fall. So getting the budget approval for if you're going to go for leadership training, you're basically going to need to do that the first 9 months of the year. Now, first quarter, they're probably going to be pretty busy. So it's a second and third quarter reach out. Because by the time you call them in October, November, they've already got their vendors lined up. They've already got their budget committed to where all their leadership training is going to be. So every industry has its own sense of timing and the budgeting. Luckily, in corporate America, it's traditionally on a calendar year. As some of you know, I'm also a volunteer mayor, and they tend to do a fiscal year on a different cycle. So you need to find out coming out of the gate, when is the budget cycle for the company relative to when you're going to be able to get in there. I will tell you that in the 20 plus years that I did executive search, my best quarter was my fourth quarter. So if you can find the ideal straddling, so in other words, basically the reason my fourth quarter was phenomenal was that people would dip into the next year's budget, and then they had the end of the year budget still to use. So sometimes if you can figure out your industry and where the budgeting is, you can actually find the sweet spot where you can possibly double dip and increase the odds of you being able to get into the budget and get your project on board. And now basically here is, I feel we have 20% have a problem, but they don't know about the solution. So that's another terrific idea, you going after this market where you can get them based on this dripping of these emails, okay, and the cadence of the sequencing relative to showing them small vignettes of knowledge will help them understand why your product and service is going to help them with a solution. And then 30% in today's market may plan to purchase in the future, but they're not necessarily interested. But this is because predominantly they don't know that they even have a problem. So, and then 40%, I feel at this point, they're not going to plan to buy. And I feel this number has gone up from the 30% before when Chet Holmes originally created the pyramid, is because people are more skeptical. They're also more conservative with their money. They've been through a cycle of recessions and non-recessions. And so they're, to me, are holding on to their money more fiercely. And so they're just some that have a headset that you aren't going to get through. So this is where, this is the 60%. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. This is, okay, so much for that. A minute. This is the 60%. So 40% you probably aren't going to get, but 60% you have a high probability, in my opinion. But it is going to take multiple reach outs. It's not going to be, most people quit after they do one phone call or do 2 emails. It's going to take reaching out and developing a relationship with them over time, and trust and name recognition. So who is your ideal customer? So when I did the research project that I shared with you, when I reached out to about 25 people, I had 2 categories of where the bulk of their feedback in terms of what was their biggest frustration, what was their biggest challenge. And part of it was staying in touch with the customer, their ideal customer. The other one was, which applies here, is the challenge of getting in front of the right eyeballs. How do I really find out who my customer is? Let alone, as we all know, you have to know who the decision maker is. You can't spend your time with people that are basically kind of taking you along, but do not have the ability to cut the check, confirm the project for the organization. And then if you can work with this system, you're going to eliminate, which another problem that came up in my research project is that people are tired of having their sales on a roller coaster. They'll be up and they'll be down. They'll be up and they'll be down. The sales are not consistent. And what happens is, it's human nature, is we all get busy. We get the new client, we get involved in a project, and then we stop doing our marketing. And then we go off with that client, that we finish the project, and then we realize we haven't nurtured and maintained our pipeline of the people that are coming up. So that's why I'm saying down the road, So maybe you don't have time to make the 4-hour calls or the 2-hour calls. Because when you're totally dry and you finish a project and you've got to start all over again, you're obviously going to be making at least a 4-hour commitment to the system. But if you can make a commitment to either 30 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is. So from 9 to 9:15, I'm going to send out, some contacts on email. I'm going to make 2 phone calls, whatever it is, you're going to, it's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Get it down to a manageable amount, make the commitment, block your time on your calendar, and meanwhile, go work with the client on the big project. And you may say to yourself, oh, I'm not going to do it today because I'm behind schedule on the project. You have to keep the commitment because it'll serve you well. Because meanwhile, as I say, you're tickling the feet, you're warming up the plate, you're beating the drum. So as that project starts to wane out and maybe it's not quite as intense and you start to reach out to people, it's not going to look phony. It's not going to look artificial. Okay. The other thing is with human nature is sometimes when we are going through a desert or a roller coaster ride and we're down at the bottom of the trough, you can find when you're calling out to people that basically you can hear it in your voice. Okay. There's a little bit of, I don't want to call it desperation, but there's an over eagerness that it can be unsettling to someone on the other side. But if you feel that you're in control, and that's what I'm talking about, the system is for you to feel like you are in control of your business. And by doing the system and knowing that you are working diligently every day, and we can work out a system, you can break it out in terms of how much time you're going to spend on LinkedIn, how much time you're going to spend sending emails, how much time, how many phone calls you're going to make in a session, and you just keep that and you guard that time. And those are your golden hours. And you keep that commitment over time, you will see the rewards of that. But it's going to take time. The other problem is in today's world, and I believe personally that social media has diluted the natural trust that we all carry in our heart because, and we won't even start talking about AI, which is another conversation, but the combination of AI and social media, there is so much lack of genuineness. There is so much artificial positioning. There is so much stuff that frankly is not true that people are more suspicious when you kind of come out of left field and suddenly you're going to call them and start to pursue them. So there is, to me, trust is a long-term relationship. It's being committed to slowly nurturing and creating a relationship. The irony was when I was in college and when first hired by GE, I spent about, I want to say 8 or 10 years out of New England. And one thing I learned in New England is they are naturally very slow to trust. Um, and when I left, they were all so upset because I left, and it was like it turned out I had more friends than I realized because they were cautious about earning that trust, and believing in the trust. I come to the Midwest. In the Midwest, people tend to kind of be more open to trusting people. But in today's world, I feel like some of that has changed a little bit with what's going on. So that's why I'm encouraging in the long term, be committed to working the process and being patient with the process. And then another thing that came up in the research project that I did, and we're going to address that down in the third week, is keeping enough people by prospecting in their pipeline. And that's what I'm going to show you, these databases. If you can carve out this golden hours for yourself, be it an hour or 30 minutes, and keep to it, it will help you build that pipeline for the prospecting. So let's look at the sheet that I sent you, which is customized for the B2B market. So what happens when you work on a lot of this in other coaching programs, which are very good, don't get me wrong, they will talk about the ideal customer profile, but they also get into demographics more. So if you've ever been on a coaching program that is more B2C, talks about Facebook, doing a lot of work on there and getting customers, they tend to go more for the demographics, what's the income in the household, how many people are in the household, the ages, do they have children, that type of situation. But this is a customized B2B ideal customer profile. So somewhat in ranking here, the first thing you need to define is what industry are you in? So in my executive search firm, my niche, because I'm a firm believer in the niche philosophy, you cannot be all things to all people. You want to build narrow and deep as opposed to shallow and wide. So my industry was consumer products, non-packaged goods, housewares and hardware industry. And that's how I built my entire 6-figure business over a 20-year basis because I was very niched. I was known as the resident expert, and everybody went to Eleanor to help with all her executive search needs in that industry. When I moved into the leadership area, I made it broader. Okay. I did it more on a geographic basis. It was going to be the greater Chicago area because yes, I could be getting on planes, but for me, it was easier to work on the greater Chicago area. And if you live in a major metropolitan area, we are blessed in a lot of ways with that. Okay. So then you go, and so now my current business is basically niched even further. So it's niched to B2B businesses, predominantly on the manufacturing and service side. And basically it's for family owned companies. I am not working in the public marketplace, publicly owned companies. I did when I was in the executive search, but there are a lot of companies that were family owned. I find the family companies really resonate with me. Some of them are dysfunctional, but I totally get it. And I can be the sage counsel to walk them through some of their family issues. When I was in the executive search area, my targeted market became between the 75 million to the $150 million companies. Those were the people that needed my services. And I found that over time. I was working Fortune 500, but Fortune 500, at least for me, sometimes was frustrating because they were so large that they suddenly had a committee that had to make a decision about whether or not they were going to hire my services. When you get down to the smaller sized organizations, then you're dealing with the president, you're dealing with the owner, and you're dealing with the decision maker. You're not having to go through all the layers. That personally matches my style. I'm a hyper A type. I'm a no nonsense gal. I like to move fast and move hard and move intensely. And that's the commitment I make to my client, is that I can traditionally fill their projects faster than they can, and any of my competitors. But what happens is I have to work twice as hard to keep my pipeline going. Because I'm so intense, I sometimes will get, in the past, have gotten focused that I would actually shut down building my pipeline and I would come back out and it would hurt me. And one year, believe it or not, earlier, this is years ago, this is about 22 years ago, I went through 9 months without an income. I kept calling, I kept reaching out to people. And then on that 10th month, I did 13 months worth of sales. But what that lesson taught me was I had to remember and stay committed to my pipeline. I couldn't get lost and totally involved with a client per se to the exclusion of not building my pipeline. So that's one of the reasons I'm committed for giving this message to you and to keep doing the same thing. It all worked out in the numbers with the IRS because I did it all like within, 13 months worth of sales, like in 1 month, but it was pretty intense. But I never put myself in that situation again because the 9 months was a bit scary. So what I want to talk about is SIC code and NASA's codes, which is the particularly uniqueness of this B2B system. If you look at your last 3 to 5 clients and you can, and through the databases, if you haven't had a chance, I'm going to show you how you can find their SIC codes. Okay. So that's going to help artificially guide the filtering on the databases in terms of who is the ideal person that you should be going after. So if there's going to be a customer, it's going to somewhat have a similar demographic profile in terms of size of company, number of employees, and product category. It doesn't mean you can't expand out of this, but this is a starting point I'm going to have you start with, because it's like anything. If you can find the commonality of the person you're going to reach out to, and you could say something like, right now, I have a client that is in the travel industry. Okay. They do corporate travel. Well, they were frankly kind of excited when they realized that I also previously have had a client in the aviation industry. So that gives them some comfort. Now, whether or not those industries are exactly the same, that's another conversation. But this is why your SIC code can possibly help you, because you can say to someone, based on who you've worked with in the past, I worked with someone, let's say, that is in the fabric industry, or I worked someone that is in injection molded plastic, or I worked with someone in the cosmetic industry. But if you can get a synergism through your SIC code, it'll help in the conversation. It'll help expedite the credibility when you reach out in your email. So annual sales, okay? So you need to pick the sweet spot of who are the people that can afford your business. So there again, for me on the search business, I shifted down from the larger companies to the 75 to the 150 because they had the budget. I was a 5-figure project every time I walked into the door, and they had to have a certain amount of money to be able to afford the 5-figure check. Same thing with in terms of where are the levels of the people. The companies now I work with, I'm not going with the larger companies because the larger companies have very large sales teams. They have vice presidents of sales, they have executive vice presidents of sales. And for the most part, they are not going to want an outside person to come in and do the sales training in their organization. When I get down to the smaller organizations, there's less bandwidth up there, and I now become more valuable to them in terms of my sales and marketing background because I can go in and I can overlay over the people that they currently have, because in some cases, my background is broader than their internal staff. Same thing with number of employees. You've got to find out the sweet spot depending upon what type of product or service you're selling. And monthly budget, as opposed to an annual budget, when I show you on some of these databases, you're going to see where they'll break down the advertising budget, they'll break down the legal fees budget, and you can see where the companies have the budget set aside for the amount of money that traditionally in the past they have spent on certain categories. And that can be a benchmark for you to see if your services will make sense for approaching that company. The buying process, is it a bid? Okay. Are they doing RFP, they're doing RFPs? Or is it just whoever comes in? So it's a matter of how do they do their buying process. You're not necessarily going to have all these points filled in, but the more of these points on the system that I'm sharing with you here that you can fill in, the better it's going to help you on targeting your client. And the decision maker, as we all know, you need to know who's really making the decision. And it blows my mind in today's market, but I think there again is because some people that are still coming in, they're younger in their careers than I am. How many people get all excited and they think they're working with a decision maker and they're not? And then a consideration is market challenges or issues or your product or service will solve. They may not be aware of it. Another thing is once you figure out your SIC codes on your list, you can do a broad search in Google and see if there's some things going on in the industry that you may not be aware of that your product or service will help. And then here, business goals. This may be tricky to get until you talk to somebody, but basically if you know what their business goals are, short term, like in 3 months or long term. Another client that I at this point, it's a prospect that I'm working with, has told me that basically this year in 2024, they're making a new acquisition of a whole new division. Okay. So it's actually going on right now this month. So I know that I'm going to be following up with that person, maybe not necessarily this month, but I'm going to be reaching out to them in May and June to see if they are ready for me to go in and do the sales training for the new division. Relative to long term, that to me is something that's going to happen next year. So if you know someone's doing a consolidation, a downsizing, or something, but anything you can pick up in a conversation or over a luncheon or on the phone could possibly help you. Technology is using, I put this in here because sometimes in today's market, you can have a product or a service, and suddenly now there's technology that's trying to replace that. Okay. Or you may be competing against it. Social media presence on LinkedIn. If you have access to Sales Navigator in your backend and you're filtering, it'll show you how many time are people posting. Okay. So have they posted in the last 30 days? So even though you can try and do your whole filtering and your reach out list on Sales Navigator, and you think you're going to do it through LinkedIn, you basically can't. It's to me, it does not make a lot of sense to reach out to someone on LinkedIn that hasn't posted in the next 30 days because they're not going to see any of your, you know, comments. They're not going to see any of your likes. They're just not doing that. On the other hand, what most people aren't thinking about is, and this is the way I look at it, is if they are posting on LinkedIn within the last 30 days, yes, I'm going to do the LinkedIn system. I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to do this whole system, that I also do with another coach. But the point is, I also, in the future, making a note that the people that aren't posting, I want to separate those lists because those are the people that I'm going to need to have a separate second campaign, and I'm going to need to use the voicemail and use the email. And in some cases, I haven't tried this yet, but I'm going to be. But I will make a lady's bet that possibly those people are going to be easier to reach because they're not getting people to reach out to them. The majority of people are using LinkedIn, and just because it's easy, it's there, and they're using that as a primary source to quote unquote do their prospecting. So anytime you can get away from the crowd and do it a little bit differently, providing that you have done a valid test market and found out that you're getting some callbacks, some response, then try it. If you aren't getting the calls and response, and you make a commitment for 30 days to do the system and target those people on LinkedIn that aren't responding, that aren't posting within 30 days, and suddenly they're calling you, which I have to tell you, like in the last 30 days, I've made a lot more phone calls that I have, number one, for this course and some other things, and people are all picking up my phone calls. And sometimes I know the people directly, or I'm getting them through a friend. And I can't tell you, I've had a couple comments recently like, well, no one ever calls me anymore because everybody's so online. They're all focused on the LinkedIn thing and they're focused on their emails. So I would encourage you to consider that as another possibility. In my case, geography restrictions. My executive search, I worked nationally, I worked internationally. The bulk of it, 90% was nationally, and then I did 10% international. In the case of both, like I said, the business, the corporate success partners, and also initially on my B2B turbocharged sales, I am restricting it artificially and starting in the Metro Chicago area. Because there again, for me, I am a people person. It's easier for me to get in the car, go meet with people directly. It doesn't mean that I can't develop a relationship over Zoom with someone long distance, but initially for these businesses, I am choosing to maximize and utilize the benefits of being in the metropolitan Chicago area. And you will see when we get into the back of these databases, they're very similar to the LinkedIn Sales Navigator that you can specify. You can specify a town, a zip code, you can specify, metropolitan Chicago. And I happen to live in the northwest suburbs, but to me, it's open. I have separated, by the way, database lists. So I have North Shore, I have western suburbs, and I have some of mine separated already by subsets within Chicago. And some of that I had to do manually off my list, but I was able to do some of it through the database. And then the market competitors, if you can figure out who their competitors are, then that kind of gives you an idea because you can track them. Another technique, which you may not have used for a while, or maybe you're already using it, and that is using Google Alerts. So set up some Google Alert accounts for either the key people that you want to follow or the people that basically are part of your market competitors, just to see what their competitors are doing. And so that can give you some insight and trends that are going on in that industry. And then I put down unique characteristics because sometimes it could be something like there again, to use Sales Navigator as an example. I can go in there and I can pull out my college. Okay. So I went to school out east at Boston College. My undergrad's at Northwestern. But for me, Northwestern is probably going to help me. It was Kellogg. That's going to help me more if I want to screen out for just the people in the Chicago market that have graduated from Kellogg. And I can use that as a way to warm up the plate when I'm reaching out to them. Unique characteristics could be if this is a bit of a reach, but the point is if you've known someone in your community through your kids growing up in PTO, or you go to the same church, or you find out that someone you see that if you spend some time on Facebook, you see they have a golden retriever, you have a golden retriever. So there's just certain little things that you may find that may help you connect with somebody. So what are the four qualifications of a true customer? It's a prospect that needs what you're selling, a prospect that can use what you're selling and can afford it, and do they want it? And sometimes, as I said earlier, what comes down to the want is basically, do they know if they have a problem? This one here, number 3, I will tell you, I learned this personally the hard way, and I launched 4 or 5 books that I wrote on job search. I was doing training courses on showing candidates how to land jobs. But the irony was, during one of the recessions, is that most of those people did not have the money to pay for the services for my program. So that was another lesson I've learned, and you become wiser as you go through. So let's talk about the unlimited pre-qualified prospects and go into the databases. And let me do another screen sharing here. So I'm going to stop this one and come back. And I have this open up here. I left this open. Give me 1 minute. Where's my Google? Okay, here. Let's see. There we go. Let's see if this works. All right, so I want to get over to a tab. All right. All right. So this is Data Axle. So I'm going to send you a sheet, and hold on. And basically this is the first database I'm going to show you. So when I went through this, I have an example I'm going to show you. I also downloaded some. I'm going to show you how the downloads look. So basically you come in here and you're going to go into search. So there's another database that I've been working with also, which is this Mergent. It's a little bit slower. This one's a little bit faster, and in all candor, I'm a little more familiar with this one. So let's say here, I'm going to go in. There we go. All right. I'm going to go down. I'm going to pick my state. Sometimes I put the city in, but it's like someone can have a slightly different address. So I actually just start off with the company name and do the state first. And then what's going to happen here, it's going to give you your results. So if you know, say in this case, it just happens to be one. Hold on here. All right. So let's go down here first. So if you don't know your SIC codes, you go into the file. Where is it? Let me paste it here. All right. So here is where you can, in a backward way, figure out your clients. So the clients that you really like, the ones that resonate with you, or let's say you're opening up a new division, and so you have a new product that you're going to go. So let's say you have a consulting business, but now you're going to do an online business, or you're going to write a book or something where you're expanding a business. You take the people that you think you want to do business with, and you look at the SIC code. And if that truly is your targeted market, this is what you're going to take. So I dealt with just the primary. Okay. And I took the primary, I made a note on the primary and the SIC code and the primary on the NASA's code. But what I wanted to show you is it gives you obviously this information. Sometimes it'll give you a business profile. In this case, it's not. It gives you, tells you, telling you how many employees, here gives you their sales volume. There's also a thing here on it on the credit rating, okay? How many years they've been in the database. Comes down, gives you the key executives. Here's where it's giving you the budgets. Okay. So like I said, if you're selling bookkeeping services or accounting services, you can see how much they're spending. Here's their advertising budget. Here's their legal. Normally you don't have this business history in most profiles aren't this extensive, but it's a privately held company, so I think they've been passing the company back and forth between family members. But this is one of the sweet things I like right here. Hold on here. Is this gives you some of their competitors. So it doesn't mean they're going to be an exact competitor, but it's worth it depending upon how much bandwidth you have and how specific you are in terms of targeting. Is that this is another resource that a lot of people don't think about, that you could go in and look at these people and see, are these, go into each one of these files. So basically I would take a screenshot or see if you can cut and paste it. I haven't tried cutting and pasting this. You can print this whole thing if you want, okay, right here. And then it'll be there. You can download this whole profile. So speaking of which, I don't know if I can do that from here. Let me take you through the example of showing you how I'm going to find more of this particular profile. And I did save some of the downloads from before. Let me see how how it's going to work with screen sharing. I may need to leave this tab and share it from another point. So now I'm going to go back. I'll do a new search. I'm going to go into the advanced search. All right. So this, for those of you that are familiar with Sales Navigator, it's a little bit like Sales Navigator in terms of where you're going to pick your spot. So basically, you can pick company name, executive. You can pick here with keywords, which I'm going to do in a minute. You can pick your geography area. So you can pick metro, or you can do this. You can pick up the actual city. And then what else do I want to show you? And here, for me, you can pick public or private if you want to do. I have done just the female-owned searches. All right. So if I go in here, so I'm going to pick my biz type. So now I'm going to I'm going to search just on the SIC code. I can do both, but let's just do the SIC code. So I'm going to do it down here. 353101. And then I'm going to go over to, I'm going to pick out my state. I'm going to pick Illinois. And then I'm going to, I want to pick my county. All right. Because the county is going to take me narrower than a metro search. And right now I want to start very narrow. I can always go out wider. So let's say I come down here, I'm going to pick my county. Wait, I have to pick the state again. And I'm going to, in this case, where am I? All right. So let's say I pick Kane County in this case. So now you see how I had this 18 million over here. So now I'm going to update the count and I end up with 143. Now, last time I'll have to see what I did differently because I was kind of like rushing a little bit. Last time when I did it, I ended up with 55. So I must have done something a little bit different. But basically, if I had 55, it'd be a little bit easier. But 143 isn't all that bad to weed through. So you can come in here and you can pick each one. But what I'm going to show, oh, darn it, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, it's bringing up each one, and then you could filter it from there. But let me take you back one to the list. Okay, so what I wanted to show you is if you click on this whole thing, then you come down and you click this again. It's a little bit time consuming, but you have to click each page to get the entire list. It's just the way the system works. And now I'm going to download it. So in my case, I tend to like Excel. I'm not crazy about common delimited. You can download it or you can email it to yourself. Okay. Let me see if I can move this bar again. All right. So do me a favor, let me know. Can you see the Excel sheet over here? Is it showing or not? All right. So as before. All right. So let me do this. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and just see if I can go in there just to show you. All right. There you go. So now you see it, right? Yeah. So this takes, I mean, it's more information than what you want. And like I said, the point is I like the 55 one, but this is a long list. So you just start it. And so this is going to give you the company name. It gives you the zip code, talks about the gender, gives you the phone number, here's your number of employees. So what I have done with these in the past is I basically just print it off on a legal paper. And then I'll actually just take a highlight pen and pick the ones I want in terms of if I want someone that has an employee size of 5 to 9, then I'm not going to bother with any of this. Or if I have a certain threshold for dollars that I think can afford my services, I'm just going to pick those out. And so you're getting their legal name, you're getting the SIC code. And I have used lists like that, and I have called people without them even knowing me, and I've gotten them to return my phone calls. So I had another example. Let me just see here for a minute. Because you can see that. Let me just show you what the I want to show you, see if I still have it up here on what the single thing looks like. Hold on here. That was screen 2. All right, no, not that. Another. I think this is it. Let me see if this is it. Yes. All right. So this is what, and I'm thinking you can see this now. This is what hold on here. This is what, in the example of the one person, okay, when I did the profile earlier to get the SIC code for the example of the Lakeview Precision Manufacturing. So when you want to download just the one profile, this is what's going to come back for you. You can print it, or you can get the download in the Excel. So it's going to give you the person's name. It gives you, talks about, in this case, it's the metro area of Chicago and Naperville, gives you the fax number, goes along, again, reiterates the SIC code, the NASA's code, gave you the, that's probably not the year they may have been the year they were created, but the point is, hold on, what else does it give you? So it gives you there's the NASA's code, there's the NASA's code, giving you, it's reiterating the sales volume, the actual versus they're falling into a category, the number of employees. Gives you their ranking. So it's giving you some miscellaneous information. The bulk of it to me that's important is the stuff at the front. And I think that that's full. All right, so let me go back here for a minute. And let me go back to the thing, and I want to see if I can answer any questions. Because I want to be respectful of our time here. And I've got to move this back up. So this is the one we went over, which is data axle. I'm going to send you this list. This one, to be honest, I couldn't show you today because they're having an error command for some reason. This is the one that takes a little bit longer, but is still a good one. Hoovers, in my case, I cannot get access through the library. Now, what I've been sharing with everybody is these are an example, at least in the Barrington Library, of databases that are available. So you're going to have to go to your local library online. You can do it from your house and figure out if they have these. If you let me know, and if there's not one of these that I have worked with, I will help you figure out how to work with it. Okay. Hoovers we all used to use for years. In some libraries, Hoovers, and I haven't had a chance to go to the Barrington Library, Hoovers used to allow libraries to use it, but you had to be sitting in the library. You couldn't do it remotely from your house. Okay. This one is one that I know some executives I've worked with have used Zoom Data. Okay. Which is similar to these, but these are free. And a low end membership is $250 a year. So I wanted to just share that to be transparent. And then basically my goal for you is, if you have the bandwidth between now and next week, is that you'll use the databases to find your top 50 prospects to work with and to narrow them down. Oops. And this is from, I think I may have mentioned a couple of you. I was lucky to have Les Hewlett, which is part of Jack Canfield's group. He was one of my endorsers and wrote a testimonial on my book. So this is something that, I've just I share with everybody over the years. The 6 confidence building strategies. Remind yourself to do something every day. You have to give it your best shot. It's better to move forward imperfect. I'm going to share with you a book list of some of my current B2B books that I really like. And so I'm going to leave you with that. And then here's your call to action. So I'm going to send you the ideal profile. You've already had it, but I'm going to probably send it again with the other documents, so they'll all be in one place. And what I would suggest is, when I'm working with people, you can either buy it used to be in the old earlier, and I would tell people just to get a physical 3-ring notebook, print everything off, put it in the notebook, or you can just download everything into a folder on the computer. I tend to be a tactile person, so I tend to do both, so then I can highlight and I can write on things, but keep them in one place. So I'm going to encourage you to start working with a database. You have my email here. Most of you have my phone number, so please call me if you're finding out at your library you don't have the databases on the list, okay? I will also send you the copy of this presentation on the PowerPoint. I'm going to turn it into a PDF. Okay, it'll be easier to go through on the email. So you'll have them right there. And then what I'm asking you to do is to start taking notes in your mind between now and next week in terms of what is the outcome, what's the transformation you provide, because that's going to be the primary building block for when we start to create the customized voicemail and the email. And then depending upon where you are in your business, if something like this is starting to get you thinking in a different direction, then just evaluate how are you going to carry this knowledge forward and how does it work with your current business model. Block the calendar for next training session. And you're going to try and, again, create a list of 50 in Excel. If you get a chance to call a couple, fine, but otherwise, I think this is a pretty big goal, is to try and get your 50. Because I'm going to take you through the whole voicemail and email, and so you might as well wait. But at least you're queuing up and getting your information. And I'm the firm believer, I'm like, I can't tell you, I never have enough highlights around my house, and I also use red pen to note things. The other option is you can, on your manual one, you can put the yellow highlight pen in, and then you can go to the physical one. And let's say you ended up with 150 and you can just delete them and then get your list down to your 50. And then for me, I'll have to look how they set it up, is for me on my phones, I always like to have the phone number on the left on my call list on an Excel. And then I also, if you are leaving the time zone, I also stack them by time zone. So I would have my East Coast first, then my Midwest, and I'd work across the country, and then I would have my list segmented in terms of how I was calling people. So that's the pre-work for next week's training. I appreciate all of you being here. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to take questions. Oh, I forgot to record it. Oh, I did. I thought I did. I've done that before.